Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, AJ Guyton, and I'm back here with another round with my guy, Austin. He's looking good in the crimson over there, man. How you doing, Austin?
Doing well, AJ. March has finally arrived. It's postseason time, and I am really excited about Indiana's chances in the postseason.
Absolutely, man. It's open, man, and that's something we're going to talk about in depth here over the next 30 minutes. But first, man, I want to, before we get to that good juicy stuff, man, let's get to that Michigan versus Indiana recap that happened over this past weekend. 75-73 win for Indiana in overtime. Indiana trailed late in that game, but managed to put together some defensive stops, managed to score at an opportune time, knock down a timely three by JHS to tie the game, coming off a stream after having a subpar offensive night up to that point, but did hit the big shot and some key defensive stops down which helped solidify a 3 seed in the Big Ten tournament, and which will help Indiana because they get a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. Man, did you get a chance to watch the Michigan game, and what is it that you took away from that game?
Yeah, I was on the call for that game. Just so intense. Everyone's heart was just pounding in that game. It almost felt like last year's senior day game against Rutgers, where you're going in, you're feeling good. Of course, so much different last year. Indiana's already in the tournament. They're playing a Michigan team that's desperate, that is, on the bubble, believe it or not, even though they came into that game second in the Big Ten. They had just lost, a couple games in overtime, one in double OT against Illinois, and they got off to the start they wanted. And then right as, 3 minutes under 4 timeout in the first half, they let Michigan back into it, and it's like a 2-point lead for IU at the half, but they pulled away. They hit the shots they needed. Trace with another excellent performance, nearly that insane buzzer beater to cap off what would have been a historic career and maybe the best way someone's ever gone out at Assembly Hall. 27 points. It was 4 assists and a rebound away from a triple double again, and they got the defensive stops down the stretch. The scoring was a bit ugly. Overtime was definitely a bit ugly, but Indiana finds a way to win at home again, and there was no way they were going to lose this game after what happened 5 days prior against Iowa.
Absolutely, man. The game was definitely intense, man. And I think an Indiana-Michigan game at Assembly Hall is usually always intense. And I think Indiana showed their mettle at the end of the game, with being down by 7 or 8 points and still managing to chip away, not just coming back right away, but they managed to chip away, stayed within the game, staying within themselves, made timely baskets. TJD with one of his magical performance, 27 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. And, he battled inspired Hunter Dickinson, who had 24 points and 14 rebounds as well. So it was also good. It's always good to see the clash of the big guys, and those guys, set their expectation for the game and try to deliver. So, and it helped Indiana push them into a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. So Indiana was playing for something. It was definitely senior night. It was Trace Jackson's last game, Race Thompson's last game, Miller Kopp's last game. So it's an opportunity for them to go out in style, and they did. You never want to lose that senior night game, and they didn't. So they held serve. So big ups to Indiana, who finished, they finished 12-8 in the Big Ten, 21-10 record. They protected home court for the most part, 15-2 at home, with a 5-7 true road record. So, I would ask you this question. I know Indiana came in with a lot of expectations. They came in with the expectations of being the number 1 team standing at the end, because they had all the pieces. A lot of different things happened during the season, weathered the storm, but couldn't get back to the top of the mountain, but got close. If I were to ask you what grade you would give the Indiana Hoosiers for this season, what grade could I see coming from Mr. Platt?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, we did this at the beginning of the season. We did our predictions, and now we're going to stamp the report card. For me, if I'm thinking of the season as a whole, if you're including the non-conference, man, I was pretty pessimistic going into the season. I didn't say that a lot on the podcast. I wanted to give off good vibes because I know you're very optimistic, but I thought Indiana being, ranked number 1 in the Big Ten might have been a bit high. I thought coming in, the AP poll might have had them a bit higher, and especially when they went on that 3-game losing streak in January January, man, I thought maybe they wouldn't even make the tournament at all. Glad I didn't say that because I think LSU would have needed to find a new podcast host. But other than that, I'm giving Indiana an A- overall. I was really positive about this season. The non-conference, they held serve. They won half of those 4 big games. They had a great true road win against Xavier, which is turning out to be one of the better true non-conference road wins in the entire conference, I think, as a whole, just because so many teams were playing in neutral site tournaments. And then I get it. Arizona, Kansas, those games, okay. They weren't going to go undefeated in the non-con. They won all the other games they were supposed to. And then you go into the Big Ten season, boy, a complete turnaround. After starting 1-4, the ugly loss to Rutgers, Indiana lost 3 of 4 after the losses to Arizona and Kansas back-to-back weeks. They turned it around with that 5-game winning streak after that 3-game losing streak, and they figured it out. And if I told myself or I told you that in beginning of January that Indiana ended up 12-8, then I would have been pretty happy and playing for a spot in the double bye on the last day. So I'm giving them an A- overall. I think in both the non-con and the Big Ten combined, I think it was pretty even in that sense.
Look at you being super positive, man. I'm going with a B-, and I'm going to B- simply because of the amount of expectations that they had and that they accepted coming off a great into the season last year, a nice little 2-game tournament run at the Big Ten run that they had. But the expectations was championship. And, they didn't quite reach that. And but in that storm, there was some bright spots. They didn't achieve what they set out to achieve, but they got out to a hot start. Then they started to suffer that adversity as you got into the 9th and 10th game, and they were able to pretty much just cruise from that moment on. But there was still some disappointing losses. I thought, me personally, the gauge to me was going to be Kansas because it was a true road game, and Kansas is one of the top 5 teams in the country. If you're saying that we're one of the best Big Ten teams, or we're the best Big Ten team in the conference, and we go to Kansas and we lose by 22, I didn't mind losing. I mean, it's tough. Fall Gallon, Assembly Hall, Cameron Indoor Stadium, Chapel Hill. I mean, these are tough places to go and get a win. You go get a win in those places, then you're setting yourself to say that you can play against anybody. But they lose by 22, and it really never was a game from the beginning to the end. That was a disappointing loss. The Big Ten Iowa opener was a loss. All kind of things went well. Only lost by 2, but it's a loss. At Michigan State, I felt was a loss. That game where we should have won. Michigan State is not the Michigan State of old, but they kind of, we got up to a good start, and then we let them back in. They dominated the game from the middle of the first half on to the rest of the game. And then that home loss versus Iowa, the 22-point loss at home to an Iowa team who can't guard a tree, and we couldn't seem to score on them. But in the mix of that, we had great wins. I thought the home game versus Purdue, excellent win. Then to go to Purdue and do what you did, excellent win at Xavier, and in the throttling of North Carolina at home, I felt were great wins. But with those expectations comes responsibility, and we didn't quite achieve it. So it's hard for me to say I'm gonna give you an A on a test when you only got 85% of the answers correct. But finishing with 12-8 record, 21-10, third in the Big Ten, in a jumbo Big Ten. I think it could have been multiple third place teams. I think is a win. I think that's another step in the right direction. I know a lot of the fans would like to win a championship right away. When you're coming in as a guy like Mike Woodson, you're trying to erase, 4 or 5 years worth of tough habits that didn't lead to winning. And it's going to take a little bit of time. And I don't know where we finished last year. I think we finished like 9th last year or something like that. I know our Big Ten record was 9-11, but finishing 12-8. All right, now it's going to be disappointing if next year we begin and we go backwards, and now we're fighting 500 in the Big Ten. So I think Mike Woodson has these guys climbing in the right direction. Let me ask you this question about Indiana basketball: what if you had to? We're both looking from the outside in. What is Indiana's identity?
Well, going into the season, we thought it was defense. And you asked me this question, and I was befuddled. I was like, I don't know what answer there is. But defensively, Indiana, you look at the advanced metrics, they didn't really favor Indiana defensively this year. And that's mainly because the loss of Xavier Johnson turned out to be so crucial, and just of guys in the straight line drives, getting to the basket, and struggling a bit on pick and roll. And then defensively down low, if you have that second big man, without Race Thompson, that was an issue as well, just to have him defensively, even though offensively, when he returned to the court, he wasn't quite 100%. So their identity used to be their defense and winning at home, but this year was offense. They were able to score. They slowed the games down when they needed to get wins. They played in those lower scoring games. You think the game against Michigan, the game against Illinois, they were able to hold teams under 70 points, but it was supposed to be defense, and it turned out to be offense, which I think is a good thing considering how much they really struggled in that department last year.
Absolutely, man. I'm still trying to figure out what their identity is. I know that offensively their identity is to throw the ball to Trace Jackson, but defensively it's like sometimes we're really good, sometimes we're really bad. So it starts with the point of attack. As good as JHS is as a freshman guard, it's just tough to be that defensive prowess that early in your career as well. So that, like you said, the loss of Xavier Johnson, the lack of contribution by Jordan Geronimo, because I think he could have helped, solidify some of that defensively, and the up and down play of Race Thompson as well. So it's hard to be great defensively when half of your pieces are out, and then when they're in, they're always trying to get back to where they were. So that's just a question I love to think about next, man. So let's move on towards this week all the postseason awards came out. Congratulations to Trey Jackson Davis on first team All American, which he'll be in most publications, and first team All Big Ten as well. And JHS, I believe he was freshman of the year. I believe he was second team All Big Ten as well. And Miller Kopp getting what I never heard of was the Sportsmanship Award. So congratulations to those guys. Well deserved. You guys work extremely hard. You always have an opportunity to get something out of the game. You know what I mean? So if you could get something out of it individually as well as collectively, it all works together, man. So did any of the awards go in a different way than you thought they would go, or did they kind of come out like you thought they would come out?
Yeah, exactly what I had it as. I figured Zach Edey would get it. I think it's mainly due to the fact that it's just Purdue was the better team in the season in the standings. I think that's just the way it has to go. I feel like I know it's not all the time it's the right decision, but that's always the way. It feels like any MVP award or anything like that in any sport kind of goes. It's to the team that does the best and the player that's the best on that team. And without Zach Edey, boy, Purdue is. Whoa, I don't even know where they would be because that's how good he was for them this year. And I mean, give credit to Trace Jackson Davis. This conversation was over a month and a half ago. It was Zach Edey. It was done and dusted. It was locked up and it was being shipped to West Lafayette. And Trace really made a case for himself. Did what he needed to do against Purdue in those two games, led them to wins. I just think also Jalen Hood-Schifino being on the floor and being such a threat that he was takes away from Jackson Davis and his scoring abilities, but he had more blocks. Trace did was just below him in points, was finished 1 point behind, just below him in rebounds. I believe definitely had more assists. The passing was absolutely outstanding. I think if you take it from the beginning of the year to the end, I think it deserves for Edey, but in just conference play, Trace Jackson Davis has been the best player in the Big Ten and probably in college basketball in the calendar year 2023. So that's why he made his case. That was the way it was lined up. It was always going to be that way. I just don't think Trace did just enough to get over that hump. And then Jalen absolutely deserved it. Boy, everyone's talking about Bryce Sensabaugh coming into the season. Ohio State completely, their season went the wrong way. And Jalen stepped up in the games he needed to, found a way to get those big games on the road. The career high against Purdue sealed it for him, I think, 35 points, went 5 of 7 from downtown and led Indiana that huge win on the road at Mackey. So all the awards, I think, and those two definitely went that way. And I mean, Coach of the Year was always between Matt Painter and Chris Collins at Northwestern. I mean, you got to give Collins, credit as well, but that one could have gone either way. But I think they got the Conference Player of the Year and Freshman of the Year right.
Absolutely. And shout out to Chris Collins, a guy I worked for a season, man, well-deserved award, and all those guys. I know how hard Chris works. I know how hard that staff works. To have success, especially in the Big Ten after not having a successful season really since 2017, man. And usually you lose your job before you get an opportunity to win a Coach of the Year award. And he definitely took advantage of that. So, you could have went either way. Matt Painter, I think Purdue kind of sputtered a little bit towards the end. I think it cost him the Coach of the Year job because there was pure dominance all the way up to, the early January. So shout out to all those guys. Making those impacts on the Big Ten and winning those awards. And Assistant Coach of the Year. I didn't even know they gave that out with the Chris Lowry at Northwestern as well. Up next, man, we got the Big Ten Tournament, man. So, like we talked about earlier, Indiana gets the double bye, man. And, They will face probably, I mean, the winner of I think is a Maryland-Nebraska game, and Maryland's is a thorn in people's side when it comes to winning games in the Big Ten. They're devastating at home, not so devastating on the road, but picked up a couple good road wins and to solidify themselves in the NCAA tournament. Indiana really hasn't fared well in the Big Ten tournament. I don't know when the last time we actually won the Big Ten title championship, but it's something that is a motivating factor for those guys. And if you look at the bracket, it looks like we have a nice chance with I think Maryland over there to beat probably if Nebraska, unless Nebraska upset them, and then Northwestern is probably the final product to beat. I believe they're down there with Indiana. So I think this is a year. If you're looking at this Indiana team, we've seen them play all year, man, and we've had our critiques of them. We've had guys in and out the lineup. We have a change in style for about 4 or 5 games, and Race comes back, we go right back to the same exact style. What are you looking for different out of this Indiana team going into tournament play? Is there any areas you want to see that are focal points for the Indiana basketball team in order for them to make them a nice run here in the Big Ten Tournament Championship and the NCAA Championship?
Yeah, absolutely, AJ. I think it's just the fact that playing, potentially 3 games in 3 days, and everyone talks about how the Big Ten tournament is probably a big reason why, no Big Ten team has won the NCAA title in so long, just because of this grueling stretch. And even 3 games in 3 days is a lot. So I think Indiana might have to play smaller in like this. I just think that you're going to have more depth off the bench. Race Thompson, I still think, I don't know if he's entirely 100%. I hope he's practicing his free throws after missing 4 in a row against Michigan, which almost cost them. But I think Indiana's got to go to their bench a bit more. Got to be able to adjust, and that's exactly what this tournament is like. Got to be able to protect the 3-point line. That's something that can really carry you away and get you out of a game pretty easily, considering IU is still not the best 3-point shooting team in terms of attempts, is what we've been really looking at. Not necessarily percentages, but they just need to shoot more. They shot 15 against Michigan, which is a number that's really where it should be. Maybe that's even higher than their season average. But I think they have to play smaller and maybe be able to score a bit more, because we know this is a defensive team at heart. They can, wear you down like they did in those, low scoring wins during that 5-game winning streak. But I think with like this, every team's going to want to play fast and go at you immediately. I think Indiana's going to have to adjust and be ready. And I expect to see a lot more of Tamar Bates. He had a really, really nice game against Michigan. Had 2 threes and actually played really good defense down the stretch against Kobe Buffkin, to the point where Hunter Dickinson was the guy who was getting the ball almost every possession down the stretch for the Wolverines to try and get them, that win in either regulation or overtime. So got to be able to play small and don't be afraid to go to the bench. And you don't have Xavier Johnson. That's, of course, news that he's done for the year. So he's not going to be a part of the formula.
Well, I agree. I definitely agree with that, man. I think that what I want to see is Indiana taking more chances from 3-point line and pushing the tempo a little bit. You can tend to get up and down in these tournaments, and I think Indiana, to a point and sometimes to a fault, begins to play super conservative. As much as I love throwing the ball to Trace Jackson Davis, we have to empower other guys to be creative other than JHS, and that's what I want to see. I want to see a guy like Tamar Bates get creative. I want to see him get back to the form that he had heading up into the Arizona game, and he knocking down big shots, playing with a lot of energy. One thing I don't see a lot of from Indiana defensively is any passing lane steals. Guys in the passing lane, making game-changing plays for Indiana. And when you don't see that, you tend to think that team is really playing conservative, and they're really just about containing the basketball, man. And basketball is about taking chances. It's about being creative. It's about scoring points. Some of these games that we played, we won, but we scored 65 points, or we won, we scored 68 points. We won, we scored 72 points. And I think that when at the tempo of some of those games early in the conference tournaments are going to be up and down, we have to maintain that pace. What I'm worried about is our depth at the point guard. Not having JHS as our only ball handler in the tournament play, man. And if I'm the other team, my focal point is getting him in foul trouble and making him work defensively because eventually he'll burn out. And if Indiana can keep him comfortable and allow him to play at the pace that he plays at, walking the ball up the floor, running pick and roll, half court offense, Indiana has really taken on the mindset of Mike Woodson as a NBA coach. They play really slow, kind of methodical. They want to get stuff off of pick and rolls. They want to dump it inside, play inside out. It's really simple basketball. Is why at times it can be easy to guard. But I would like to see those guys push that tempo up a little bit more and score more points because that's what we're going to need in the NCAA tournament. I know everybody loves the Big Ten tournament, but my mindset is always preparing for the NCAA tournament because that's really the big tournament. Indiana's firmly in the tournament, should get a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament and should have a nice 5-12 game or a 4-11 game. So I think that they're firmly in. The road looks good, man. Like we talked about Maryland versus Nebraska. I think Maryland wins that basketball game. Indiana plays Maryland. The key is this Penn State-Illinois game in which Northwestern will play the winner of that game, the 10-7 game. Northwestern is a 2 seed. And both of those are even matchups all the way around. I think Penn State drugged Illinois and at home. And I think Illinois is looking for a little get back in that game. But also I think Penn State beat Northwestern at home, but Illinois lost to Northwestern, I want to say both times. So it's a lot of underlying things that are going to play a part in the motivation of these teams. And even any of those teams that lies in Indiana's way to get to the championship game, because that would mean Indiana only has to win 3 basketball games to get to the title. 2 basketball games to get to the title game, man. And in your way. And the only team that scares me is Purdue up there at number 1. So, but Northwestern has beat us twice. It's the third time be the charm. We beat Illinois twice. Will the third charm be charm for them? So it's a lot of. I think we only played Penn State once. So, we don't know much about them, but they're scary good. They play small. They have Jalen Pickett, one of the best players in the Big Ten. He can be a matchup problem for us because of the wings. Illinois will have Terrence Shannon Jr. this time if we play Illinois, and Northwestern has beat us twice. So, but we got to get past the toughness of Maryland. I enjoyed watching the toughness of Maryland when we played at Maryland. They're fearless at home, 2 different teams, though. I feel as if that's a matchup that we get past that one, we may be going to the championship game, but we have to get past one game at a time, Maryland, because that is a tough matchup for us, man. What team in this bracket, Penn State, Illinois, Northwestern, Maryland, Nebraska, scares you the most?
Oh, it's so tough. I think if you get to that point, it would probably be Illinois. Now, I thought as an Indiana, I thought going in after Tuesday, I thought, oh boy, Indiana's done with a double bye. Every single result, I think, went Indiana's way. I think this is the best possible draw they really could have gotten because I wouldn't want to play. You wouldn't want to be the 2. I don't want to play the winner of Penn State or Illinois. Penn State killed us on the road. Illinois, I know, get it, we beat twice, but if that team gets hot, they're scary good. They could win the entire thing just with the talent that they have. They haven't pieced it together the entire season, which is why I don't think anyone believes they can win 4 games in 4 days, but it's the Big Ten. Nobody is surprised. So I think that the toughest opponent would probably, I think just at that point would be Illinois. They win 2 games. They should have beaten us realistically at Assembly Hall. They had a double-digit lead in the second half. We came back and somehow won that game, even though RJ Melendez was very close to sending that game to overtime. But, you look at this bottom half, I know that you want to avoid Purdue, you want to avoid Iowa until the finals, but you look at the possible opponents. Maryland, Indiana lost on the road by, I believe, double digits. Northwestern, they lost to twice. I get it by what, like 3 points combined? You still lost twice. Penn State, they got killed on the road. Illinois, they won twice, could have very well lost one. So head-to-head, it doesn't necessarily favor Indiana, but I'm licking my chops. You got to wait for a Maryland, a team that does not play the same basketball away from home. And Northwestern, 2 very close games. I'm not scared of them all too much just because they don't have that experience of playing in those big games. So Illinois worries me the most. I don't think it will be them, but, I mean, who knows? We could get Illinois, Indiana for the 3rd time on Saturday.
Absolutely, man. And remember, Illinois missed a ton of open layups in that game,
Yeah.
and they had a 10-point lead at the time, and had an open three to either tie it or send it to another overtime or send it into overtime to win the game, and a questionable technical foul on Hawkins on a dunk that kind of changed the momentum of the game. So Illinois is always scary. One thing I did notice is that their bigs are scared of Trace Jackson Davis, and that's a good sign for us. But I think they learned a lesson at Assembly Hall when he pulled up the monster performance, and then they were not as aggressive and very tentative against Trace at Assembly Hall, but they double team more as well. So it's a matter of with those Illinois guards, can they produce? They've been up and down throughout the year. Terrence Shannon Jr., first team All Big Ten. He wasn't there when they almost beat Indiana in the second match, but he'll be there, and they'll be a highly motivated team playing hard. I think I agree with you, but I think my scariest team is Maryland. I don't know what it is about Maryland. I think, they cause matchup problems because they're a little bit undersized in some areas, but they play extremely hard. They seem the most prepared defensively against Indiana. I don't know if that was because it was at Maryland, but they seem to have a scheme that really, really rattled Indiana. I remember watching that game. Indiana was up, and then they went down for the entire rest of the game. I started watching the game in the middle of the first half, and then it was just like a slow, methodical taking over of the game, and it's just like, what are they doing to us? But I saw a lot of aggressive defense, a lot of aggressive traps. Their rotations were on point, and that's the key to trapping. You have to have, a solid rotation out of the double team, and I don't think Maryland missed a rotation that game. But of course, we were ice cold on the road, as we always are when it comes to shooting the basketball. So in a neutral site in Chicago, we'll be a pro-Indiana crowd for sure. I'm excited about that matchup, but that's the matchup that scares me the most. I think we'll be fine if we can get past that matchup. I don't see Northwestern beating us a third time. And then obviously Illinois is another challenger. So Maryland and Illinois, we've both spoken are the scariest prospects out of the Big Ten tournament. So, man, I'm excited about it's March. I mean, what more do you want to say? It's March. It's time for for the players to put up a shut up. This is what everybody's been dreaming about. All the accolades are out, done, and we're ready to go. So next podcast we'll be talking about the NCAA tournaments. We should have a result, obviously, from our Big Ten tournament. We should have our seedings for the NCAA tournament, as they'll come out Sunday night, and we should have a lot to discuss about Indiana's prospects of reaching the Final Four here as that quest really begins after Sunday's Big Ten tournament, man. So we want to thank you guys for joining us, man. Next, and make sure you follow me. Follow me on Twitter at AJGuyton25. You can follow us on Spotify podcast, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, on the Field of 68 network. Make sure you follow us and make sure you share those links with all the other Indiana fans out there, man. Make sure you're supporting our Hoosiers as they take on the winner of the Maryland-Nebraska game and in Game 10 on the Big Ten network. I believe that will be Thursday. We don't have a time for that game yet.
It's the last game, 25 minutes after, right around 9 Eastern, 8 Central. It's whenever the game before ends, which will be Northwestern and someone.
So excited about this, man. Any parting thoughts for the Indiana Hoosiers?
They got the draw they wanted. After Tuesday, everyone was in the dumps, and every single result basically went the way. Maryland lost twice. Penn State got a big win. Iowa lost at home to Nebraska, and Indiana, of course, with all of that, basically shoved away Michigan. They held them out. So they did everything they needed. You're licking your chops if you're Indiana. You absolutely love your chances to get to the Big Ten title a step further than last year and even win it, because I'm not scared of Purdue, honestly.
All right. Absolutely, man. Make sure you hit us with your thoughts, man, either on Twitter, either on my Facebook page. Make sure let us know what you think the Indiana Hoosiers prospects are for the Big Ten tournament and March Madness going forward. This is AJ Guyton, my man Austin Platt. We're signing off a House of Hoosier podcast. We will see you next week, and we will be excited to talk about this Hoosier championship banner that we'll raise.